Chapter 1. The Mark of Singularity. When the soul knows it's set apart from the earliest moments of our lives, there are impressions not seen with the eye, but felt deep within the soul that whisper to us that we are different. Not better, not superior, but different in a sacred way. This is the mark of singularity, and it is often the very first sign that a person has been chosen. It begins not with the thunder of revelation, but with a quiet ache of not fitting in. Children who carry this mark often sense that the world around them doesn't quite align with the rhythm of their inner being, while others engage joyfully in play, lose themselves in the swirl of social interactions, or are absorbed by the mundane excitement of childhood adventures. The chosen child often stands apart. Perhaps they are drawn to solitude, preferring moments of reflection, the company of books, the quiet of nature, or even just silence itself. This isn't to say that such children are antisocial or incapable of joy. Rather, their joy is sourced differently. It flows not from external stimuli, but from inner revelations. There is a deep spiritual awareness already present, like a soul that has lived many lives and carries the wisdom of ages. And this internal awareness, although difficult to articulate in childhood, marks the child as uniquely attuned to divine frequencies. Imagine a child sitting alone under a tree, not out of sadness, but contemplation, while others chatter about superheroes and video games. This child wonders why people hurt each other, what lies beyond the stars, or if trees can feel pain. These aren't random thoughts. They are soul questions, and they are among the earliest indicators that a divine calling has already begun to stir. Biblically, this theme finds deep resonance. In Romans 12:2, we are called not to conform to the patterns of this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. That's not just a call for adults, for the chosen. This transformation begins before the age of reason. It's etched into their spirit. What makes this feeling of singularity even more profound is the confusion and sometimes loneliness it brings. The child might think, "Why don't I feel like I belong?" or "Why do I feel more deeply than others?" But these are not signs of brokenness. They are indicators that something eternal is waking up within them. In spiritual traditions across cultures, this sense of early difference is echoed. In mystical Judaism, children born under the influence of certain divine sparks are said to exhibit unique awareness early in life. In Eastern traditions like Hinduism, highly sensitive or contemplative children are sometimes seen as reincarnated sages. Even in indigenous cultures, elders watch for signs of inward-gazing children, those who seem to listen to the wind or speak to animals, believing them to be marked for spiritual leadership. Singularity is also closely linked with sensitivity. The chosen child often has an intense sensitivity to their surroundings. They may cry more easily, feel overwhelmed by crowds or loud noises, or experience joy and sorrow with remarkable depth. While modern psychology might label this as high sensitivity or introversion, the spiritual perspective sees it differently, as a finely tuned instrument meant to hear the voice of God. Such children may also display wisdom beyond their years. Parents and teachers might describe them as old souls. Their insights, even when spoken in the simple language of youth, carry a strange depth. For example, a 5-year-old may comfort a grieving adult with words that seem too profound for their age. Where does this wisdom come from? It is not taught. It is remembered. For the chosen ones, the soul carries echoes of its heavenly origin. Yet, because of their difference, these children may suffer. They might be bullied, misunderstood, or excluded. They may be labeled as weird, too quiet, or overly emotional. This societal rejection can cause them to question their worth. But from a spiritual lens, this rejection is part of the purification process. Just as gold must be separated from the dross, so too must the chosen be set apart, even painfully at times, to preserve their divine distinctiveness. In the Bible, we see this with Jeremiah. God tells him, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." Jeremiah 1:5. That divine knowledge and setting apart is not metaphorical, it is literal. To be known by God before birth is to be branded with a purpose so immense that the soul must begin preparing from childhood. And how does it prepare? Through singularity. This singularity also manifests in moral awareness. The chosen child often has an internal compass that points unerringly toward justice, kindness, and truth. While others may cheat without guilt or hurt without remorse, the chosen child wrestles with the moral implications of their actions. They seek to do what is right, even when no one is watching. This moral clarity isn't self-righteousness. It's spiritual resonance. Empathy often accompanies this moral sensitivity. Many chosen ones, even as children, feel the pain of others as if it were their own. They are the ones who cry when an animal is hurt, who sit beside the outcast at lunch, who sense when someone is suffering even without words. This empathetic tendency can be both a gift and a burden. But in the spiritual realm, it is always a sign of calling. Parents of such children may not always understand them. Some may worry about their sensitivity or their reluctance to socialize. Others may dismiss their questions as too deep or their emotions as too much. But for those who can see through the spiritual lens, these are not signs of weakness. They are evidence of a divine imprint. As the chosen child grows, their singularity evolves. It may lead them to seek solitude in nature, to write, to create, to pray in secret, or to question everything they are told. They may resist conformity, not out of rebellion, but out of alignment with their true self. They are not drawn to crowds, but to causes, not to fame, but to purpose. And this internal compass, this longing for purpose, is a gift from God. In Proverbs 4:23 it says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." The heart of the chosen one, from childhood, is sensitive not just to emotion, but to destiny. They are drawn to the sacred, to meaning, to love in its highest form. So if you remember feeling this way as a child, if you felt like you were different in ways no one could explain, if you wondered why you saw the world through deeper eyes, if you struggled to belong, know this: you were not broken. You were marked. Singularity is not something to be cured. It is something to be cultivated. Let the memory of those childhood moments be like spiritual breadcrumbs, guiding you back to the truth of who you are. Reclaim the sensitivity you once hid. Reignite the wonder you once felt. Re-embrace the questions you were told not to ask. These are not signs of confusion. They are signals from your soul. To be chosen means to be set apart. And that setting apart begins long before the world can name it. It begins in the silence of a child's question, in the depth of a gaze that sees beyond, in the ache of not quite fitting in. You were made to walk a sacred path, and singularity was the first step. Chapter 2. Consciousness. The spiritual sensitivity to see beyond. Long before language could capture meaning, And before the ego could mask intuition, there existed within the chosen child a powerful force, spiritual consciousness. This is not mere awareness in the mundane sense, but a heightened spiritual sensitivity, a soul-level perception that sees the invisible, hears the unspoken, and feels the intangible. It is as if the veil between the physical and the spiritual has always been thinner for you. This chapter explores the profound sense of perception that often emerges in childhood, a kind of inner knowing that surpasses intellectual understanding. It begins not with facts, but with feelings. While other children respond to what is obvious, the chosen one perceives what lies beneath. You noticed the tension in a room before anyone spoke. You felt the sadness behind a smile. You could intuit the storm before clouds formed. These moments were not random. They were signs of spiritual consciousness. From a biblical perspective, this depth of inner perception is no anomaly. Proverbs 20:27 says, "The human spirit is the lamp of the Lord that searches all the inner depths." This passage reveals that God illuminates the world not just through external revelation, but through the spirit of the individual, especially those He has chosen. When your spirit was awakened to perceive more than what could be seen, that was God's voice speaking in the quiet language of intuition. Children marked by this consciousness often experience life more deeply. They don't just see a flower, they feel the energy pulsing in its stillness. They don't merely hear music, they are transported by its vibration. And in silence, they hear the whispers of creation. These moments create a deep sense of mystery and awe, often difficult to explain to others. But that sense of mystery is part of your calling. Many chosen ones recall strange but beautiful experiences in childhood, the sense of being watched over, the awareness of an unseen friend, or even the ability to feel a change in atmosphere the moment they stepped into a room. They may have felt an odd mix of sensitivity and solitude. While others laughed freely, they often felt submerged in a world of subtle meanings. This wasn't sadness, it was sacred awareness. In spiritual psychology, such children are often called empaths, intuitives, or spiritually gifted. But the ancient world had other names for them: prophets, seers, oracles. These were individuals who carried within them a sensitivity attuned to divine frequencies, while others focused on what was visible. The spiritually conscious child was attuned to what was eternal. Perhaps you remember being overwhelmed in crowded places, not because of noise or chaos, but because of the flood of emotions you could feel from others. You may have cried without knowing why, sensing the grief of someone nearby. Or you may have avoided certain people instinctively, long before their hidden intentions were ever revealed. This is not superstition. It is spiritual discernment. Throughout sacred texts, God often speaks through the heart before He speaks through signs. Samuel, before understanding the voice of God, heard a call in the silence of night. Young Jesus, at 12, astounded temple elders not with learned knowledge, but with divine insight. The pattern is clear: spiritual perception precedes religious education. The chosen are awakened from within. This inner awakening often begins with a relationship to nature. Many chosen children find peace in trees, rivers, or animals. There is something comforting about the natural world that aligns with their inner vibration. They speak to animals, feel the sadness of a dying leaf, or smile at the silent dance of stars. These interactions are not child's play. They are sacred rituals. Nature speaks in symbols. And the chosen are born interpreters. For example, a child may walk into a garden and pause not to pluck a flower, but to simply listen. Something in the wind calls to them. The breeze carries a memory they cannot name. They may say, "It feels like someone is talking to me." And they would be right. In many spiritual traditions, this is known as animistic consciousness, the belief that all things are alive with spirit. But more deeply, it is the first stage in developing communion with the divine. In modern times, this consciousness is often dismissed. It may be labeled as imagination or emotional overreaction. Adults, unaware of the spiritual dimension, may silence these expressions. A child says, "I feel like something bad will happen," and they are told not to worry. But when the event later unfolds, the warning is forgotten. What we call instinct, the Bible often calls wisdom. What we name coincidence, Scripture names revelation. This perception is a sacred gift. But with gifts come challenges. One of the difficulties chosen children face is the burden of knowing. To sense that something is wrong, even when no one admits it, creates internal tension. To perceive truth that others deny can lead to isolation. You may have wondered, why do I feel things no one else feels? Or, why does no one believe me when I sense something important? These questions are valid. But the answers lie in understanding that this consciousness is not for validation, it is for mission. You were not given the gift of sensitivity to fit in. You were given it to lead, to protect, to intercede. In the spiritual realm, your role is that of a sentinel, one who sees before others do. Think of biblical watchmen, those appointed to stand on towers and observe the horizon for signs of danger or divine movement. That is what you were, even as a child. The signs you felt, the warnings you sensed, the comfort you gave without knowing why, all were part of your early training. This spiritual training isn't taught in school. It is learned through lived experience, through the quiet moments when you listened and knew something others didn't. Through the prayers you whispered without anyone teaching you how. Through the tears you cried that healed not just you, but others as well. In mystic Christianity, this awareness is described as the eyes of the heart. Ephesians 1:18 says, "I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened in order that you may know the hope to which He has called you." This passage reveals that vision is not only a function of the eyes, but of the soul. The chosen see with soul sight. As you grew older, this consciousness may have evolved. Perhaps you became more discerning with friendships. You felt drained around certain people and energized around others. You developed a quiet preference for authenticity. Lies, no matter how polite, felt like poison. Truth, even if painful, felt like medicine. This internal compass guided your actions, but spiritual perception also extends into dreams. Chosen ones often experience vivid dreams, symbolic visions, or nocturnal insights that reveal hidden truths. You may have woken up with clarity about a decision, or dreamed of events that later came true. The subconscious, for you, is not random. It is a divine classroom. Scripture confirms this in Job 33:15-16. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls on people, as they slumber in their beds, He may speak in their ears and terrify them with warnings. Dreams are a legitimate medium for revelation, especially for those attuned to spirit. So what does it mean to carry this consciousness today? It means accepting your sensitivity not as a flaw, but as a divine faculty. It means protecting your spirit from the noise of the world, not out of fear, but out of sacred responsibility. It means cultivating silence, for in silence, God speaks most clearly, and it means being willing to trust your inner knowing. Not every insight will be logical. Not every perception will be understood. But when the Spirit moves within, it brings a peace that surpasses understanding. That peace is your confirmation. You were not made to live on the surface. Your eyes were formed to see the invisible, your ears to hear the unspoken, your heart to feel the eternal. This is your gift. This is your calling. This is your consciousness. Honor it. For to be chosen is to be awakened. And to be awakened is to see with the light of God. Chapter 3. Empathy. The sacred gift of feeling others' pain. There are children who cry when others cry, even when they do not understand why. There are children who offer their toys, their food, or their silent presence to someone who is hurting without being asked or taught. There are children who sit in the back of the classroom, quietly observing the world, not because they are shy, but because they are listening to something deeper. If you were one of these children, then you likely carried the sacred gift of empathy. Empathy is not merely an emotion, it is a spiritual technology. A divine faculty embedded in the soul of the chosen ones so that they might reflect the very heartbeat of God. While sympathy sees suffering and offers condolences, empathy enters into that suffering and says, "You are not alone. I feel it too." From a spiritual perspective, empathy is a sign of divine wiring. It means your soul was tuned to the frequency of others' pain, joy, sorrow, and triumph. You were not designed to be detached or indifferent. You were formed to connect, to understand, not just with the mind, but with the spirit. Romans 12:15 captures this beautifully. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. This is not a suggestion, it is a divine invitation to live in deep communion with the emotional realities of others. It is, in many ways, the work of Christ, who bore our griefs and carried our sorrows, Isaiah 53:4. The chosen one, through empathy, mirrors this divine characteristic. As a child, your empathy may have been overwhelming. You might have walked into a room and immediately sensed the emotional climate, even when no one spoke. You may have felt inexplicably sad in crowds or schoolyards, not because of your own experiences, but because of what others were carrying. This made you different, not broken, but finely tuned. Such sensitivity often leads to a quiet kind of suffering. The chosen empath feels deeply, but does not always have the language to explain what they feel. They may become introverted, not because they fear people, but because they carry too much of them. Every interaction is an energetic exchange. Every conversation, a download of emotion. Modern psychology identifies empaths as highly sensitive people, HSPs, capable of absorbing emotional and even physical energy from others. But in spiritual language, this is more than a temperament. It is a calling. Consider the example of young Joseph in the book of Genesis. Though he was misunderstood and even rejected by his brothers, Joseph carried a heart of compassion. Later in life, when he had the power to punish them, he instead wept and forgave. That level of empathy born from pain is the mark of one who has been chosen to heal others. Empathy is also a precursor to spiritual leadership. Before you can guide others, You must be able to feel where they are. The prophets of the Bible were not cold intellectuals. They were weeping messengers. Jeremiah, known as the weeping prophet, carried the grief of a nation. His tears were his message. So too with Jesus. In John 11:35, we find the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept, yet it holds infinite depth. The Son of God, knowing he would raise Lazarus, still chose to enter into the grief of Mary and Martha. That is the power of empathy. It does not rush to solve. It chooses to be present. If you were a child who comforted animals, who cried at sad scenes in stories, who stayed up at night thinking about the suffering of the world, you were not overly emotional. You were spiritually gifted. Empathy also expresses itself through justice. Chosen ones often feel an intense need to right what is wrong. They cannot look away from cruelty. They cannot ignore suffering. Even as children, they may have stood up to bullies or befriend the lonely. Their compassion leads them to action. They are not content with pity, they long to be healers. This gift, however, comes with a weight. Empaths can become fatigued or emotionally drained, especially when surrounded by negativity. That's why boundaries are essential. A chosen one must learn not only to feel, but also to filter. Jesus himself, after ministering to crowds, withdrew to solitary places to pray and recharge. Luke 5:16. This was not selfish. It was sacred maintenance. Empathy is not weakness. It is strength cloaked in tenderness. The world often equates strength with stoicism, with not being affected. But true spiritual strength lies in vulnerability, the willingness to feel, to be moved, to care even when it hurts. When you cried with your classmates, when you listened to someone's pain without interrupting, when you offered your silence as a sanctuary that was holy work. That was ministry, even if no one called it so. And sometimes, your empathy extended to strangers. Perhaps you felt grief at seeing someone homeless, or were moved by a news story of tragedy, even if it happened thousands of miles away. This global compassion is another hallmark of the chosen empath. Your heart does not recognize borders. It beats for humanity. But such sensitivity can be confusing, especially in a world that celebrates detachment. You may have been told to toughen up, to stop being so emotional, to grow a thicker skin. But those messages, while well-intentioned, were harmful. They asked you to dull a gift God sharpened. Your task is not to stop feeling. Your task is to channel feeling into healing, into service, into love. Empathy also opens the door to intercession. Many chosen ones become prayer warriors, not because they are religious, but because they feel the burdens of others and instinctively lift them up. They do not need to be asked, they already know who needs prayer. The Spirit prompts them through emotion. In the mystical traditions, such individuals are known as burden bearers. They sense spiritual and emotional weights in people, often absorbing them temporarily so they might lift them in prayer. This is both a gift and a cross. It must be carried with grace and wisdom. To walk with empathy is to walk like Christ, to cry like Christ, to serve like Christ, and to love like Christ. If you find yourself still feeling others' emotions deeply, do not hide it. Protect it. Develop it. Train it. Empathy is the gateway to healing ministries, counseling, teaching, writing, spiritual leadership. It is the soil in which prophetic compassion grows. Proverbs 31:8-9 says, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy. Empathy is the force that fuels that speech. It is the spark behind the advocacy. It is the heart behind the mission. And so, beloved chosen one, if you were a child who felt too much, thank God, for that sensitivity is sacred. It is not a wound to hide, but a window to the divine. Use it well. Let it guide you. Let it shape your life. Because in a world grown cold with indifference, the one who feels deeply is the one who reflects heaven. Empathy is your signature. It is your light. And it is the sacred echo of the God who still weeps with us all. Chapter 4. Premonitions, divine dreams, and prophetic knowing. Long before language could give shape to meaning, and long before society taught you what was real, many chosen ones experienced their first divine messages not through words, but through dreams vivid, symbolic, often unsettling in their clarity. These premonitions, whether visions during sleep or intuitive feelings during waking hours, are among the clearest signs that a person is marked by God for a higher purpose from an early age. You may have encountered moments that seemed out of sync with the ordinary. Perhaps you had dreams that stayed with you for years, not because they were fantastical, but because they felt more real than waking life. You may have experienced a feeling of knowing something before it happened, an unexplainable certainty that something was about to shift, and then watched it unfold exactly as you felt. These moments are not accidents. They are invitations, echoes of a greater voice speaking to you in a language the soul understands, even if the mind struggles to keep up. They are divine imprints, a spiritual GPS guiding you before you even know your destination. Scripture affirms this mystical truth. In Job 33:15-16, it is written, "In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls on people, as they slumber in their beds, He may speak in their ears and terrify them with warnings." God speaks to those who are listening, and in the earliest stages of life, before skepticism or rationalism take root. Children often listen best. As a child, perhaps you dreamed of things that later happened: a relative falling ill, a change in your environment, a shift in a friendship. Or maybe you had symbolic dreams that carried deep emotion, guiding your spirit through fear, awe, or peace. These are not mere fantasies. They are communications. And if you were able to sense them early, it means your soul was already open to receive spiritual information beyond the veil. In many ancient traditions, dreams are not psychological echoes, but divine messengers. In the Bible, Joseph, first the son of Jacob, then the husband of Mary, both received critical guidance through dreams. Young Joseph, sold into slavery by his brothers, rose to power in Egypt not because of political ambition, but because of his divine gift, the ability to interpret dreams. His own premonitory dreams foretold his future, and his interpretations saved nations. Similarly, in the New Testament, God speaks to Joseph, the earthly father of Jesus, in a dream telling him to flee with Mary and the child to Egypt to escape King Herod's wrath. These dreams were not optional, they were life-saving. They were holy instructions. If you were a child who had recurring dreams, especially those with strong emotional resonance or symbols that lingered long after waking, this is a sign that you are spiritually sensitive. Perhaps you saw water, a symbol of emotion, cleansing, or transition. Or maybe you dreamed of falling, flying, or being followed. These archetypal images often contain divine insight, especially when accompanied by a deep sense of significance. Some chosen ones also experience waking premonitions. You may have felt something was off before a difficult event occurred. Maybe you avoided danger by trusting an unexplainable instinct. You may have had a sudden sense of peace or warning without any logical reason. These are called knowing flashes, brief yet powerful moments of spiritual intuition. The ancient Celts referred to such people as seers, those who could see into the spiritual fabric of reality. In Native American traditions, children who spoke of visions or dreams were often brought to the elders, not dismissed. They were believed to be spirit-touched vessels for messages from the ancestors or the Great Spirit. In mystic Christianity, dreams are part of the contemplative path. Saints like Saint Teresa of Avila and Saint John of the Cross wrote extensively about divine visions and inner illuminations that came through spiritual dreaming. Their lives were marked by dreams that shaped theology, transformed communities, and revealed hidden truths. Why are dreams such a powerful method of communication for the chosen ones? Because in sleep, the ego sleeps too. The filters fall, the defenses drop, and the soul, unguarded and receptive, becomes fertile ground for heavenly messages. There is no striving in dreams. There is only receiving. But with great gifts come great responsibilities. Premonitions are not given for entertainment, and they are entrusted for purpose. They are meant to guide, protect, or prepare you. Sometimes they come as comfort, a dream of a loved one who has passed, bringing peace. Other times, they come as warning, a sense of dread that saves you from harm. One of the greatest challenges chosen ones face is discerning between fear and true intuition. Not every bad feeling is a premonition, and not every dream is prophetic. That is why spiritual maturity is needed. You must learn to test the spirits, as 1 John 4:1 instructs. Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. Testing your experiences means asking, does this dream align with peace or fear? Does it resonate with God's voice, loving, wise, just? Does it call me into greater love, truth, or action? Chosen ones must also develop the gift of interpretation. Joseph in Egypt was not only a dreamer, he was an interpreter. That second gift, interpretation, is what turns mystery into mission. Without interpretation, a dream remains a mystery. With it, the dream becomes a map. Prayer, meditation, and scriptural grounding help with interpretation. Sometimes, your dream may lead you to a specific Bible verse. Other times, a symbol may reappear multiple times across days or weeks. The Spirit often speaks in repetition. Pay attention to patterns. They are sacred breadcrumbs. Children often have fewer distractions, which makes them excellent receivers of divine impressions. But as we grow older, the noise of life can drown out the subtle whisper of Spirit. This is why it's so important to protect your inner sanctuary. Limit the noise. Cultivate silence. Dreams flourish in stillness. You may ask, why me? Why do I dream these things? Why do I feel what others don't? The answer lies in your calling. Premonitions are not for the passive. They are for the active. You are not just a receiver, you are a responder. You are meant to act on the insight, to shift course when warned, to pray for someone when prompted, to comfort others with a word revealed in the quiet of night. Prophets were rarely given easy dreams. Often, what they saw was troubling. But they carried the vision anyway. because they knew it was sacred. So must you. If you have dismissed your dreams as meaningless or random, revisit them, record them, pray over them, honor them. The Spirit is still speaking, and you are still listening, even if only through the echo. One day, the dream you wrote down and forgot may come back in full clarity, and you will see that it was never a fantasy. It was preparation. To be chosen is to be called beyond the senses. It is to live in communion with the realm of spirit. And premonitions, dreams, intuitions, gut feelings are how the heavens speak to your soul. So keep listening, for what you see in the night may one day be the light someone else needs to find their way. And never forget, the dream is not the destination, it is the door. Walk through it in faith. Chapter 5. Protection. The invisible hand that guards the chosen. For many chosen ones, the sense of divine protection begins not with an angelic apparition or supernatural sign, but with a mysterious pattern of survival. A near miss, an unexpected escape, a turn of events so precise it could not possibly be coincidence. From a young age, those who are marked for a sacred path often walk with unseen guardians. Their lives are watched, preserved, and shielded because the purpose over them is too precious to be left vulnerable. Perhaps you can recall moments that defy explanation. You almost stepped into traffic, but something stopped you. You nearly fell into despair, but peace arrived out of nowhere. You found yourself in a dangerous situation, yet came out unharmed. These are not mere strokes of luck. These are the fingerprints of divine intervention. Psalm 91:11 declares, "For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways." This is not poetic comfort, it is spiritual truth. God assigns protection to those he calls. He places hedges around them, visible and invisible, because their mission has eternal weight. Your life, your calling, your voice, they matter too much to heaven to be abandoned to chance. As a child, you may not have understood this. Perhaps you grew up in a difficult environment, violence, neglect, trauma, instability, and yet something within you remained untouched. You were bruised, but not broken, wounded, but still dreaming. That too is divine protection. Not all protection means avoidance of pain. Sometimes it means preservation of purpose in the middle of pain. Spiritual protection often shows up through people. A teacher who believed in you, a neighbor who intervened, a stranger who offered help at just the right time. These human agents are part of the orchestration. They are messengers sent to protect, guide, or redirect. Hebrews 13:2 reminds us, "Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by so doing, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it." Angels walk among us not always with wings, but with wisdom, timing, and love. Chosen ones often feel a presence even in solitude, a warmth, a voice, a pressure in the spirit that whispers, "Don't go there," or "Stay a little longer." This is divine guidance acting as protection. The Spirit speaks not just in dreams or scripture, but in inner promptings. That nudge you felt, that sudden change of heart, it was not random. It was a shield in disguise. In the mystical Christian tradition, this protection is sometimes referred to as the hand of providence. It is the idea that God not only foresees your life, but actively orchestrates it for your good, even when you do not see the full picture. The detour that frustrated you may have been a divine redirection. The delay that annoyed you may have saved your life. Children especially are attuned to this. They may describe an invisible friend who comforts them, a feeling of being held when no one is around, or an inexplicable sense of peace during chaos. These are not products of imagination alone. They are echoes of the unseen realm. The spiritual world is active, especially around those chosen for divine work. There are also moments of supernatural intervention that chosen ones carry in memory. Stories where time seemed to slow down. Accidents that miraculously didn't happen. Illnesses that inexplicably vanished. Decisions made at the last second that changed everything. These are not stories to boast about, they are altars of remembrance. In 1 Samuel 7:12, Samuel sets up a stone and names it Ebenezer, saying, "Thus far the Lord has helped us." These Ebenezers, these memorial stones, exist in the lives of the chosen. They mark divine help. They remind us that even when we were unaware, God was already moving to protect us. Protection is also deeply spiritual. It doesn't only apply to the body, but to the soul. Many chosen ones face emotional and spiritual battles, depression, anxiety, rejection, betrayal. And yet, there remains a thread of faith, sometimes fragile, but unbreakable. You may have wondered why, after everything, you still believe, still hope, still seek God. That, too, is protection. In the unseen war for your purpose, your faith was guarded. The enemy may have tried to silence you, isolate you, deceive you, but your inner altar remained lit. That light inside you, it never went out. That's divine shielding. Spiritual warfare is real, especially for the chosen. The enemy targets purpose. And if you are chosen, you have been targeted. But take heart, because you have also been surrounded. The Psalms are filled with assurances of God's protective nature. The Lord is my rock, my fortress and my deliverer, Psalm 18:2. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them, Psalm 34:7. He is a shield for all who take refuge in him, Psalm 18:30. Even when you didn't know to pray, someone may have been praying for you. Perhaps a grandparent, a mentor, a stranger guided by the Spirit. These prayers became your spiritual armor. The chosen rarely walk alone, even when it feels like they do. There is also internal protection and inner knowing that preserves your integrity. Chosen ones often find it hard to betray themselves. Even when tempted, they feel convicted. Even when wandering, they feel the pull home. This is spiritual alignment. God does not just protect your life, he protects your essence, your convictions, your empathy, your hunger for truth. All these are shields. They keep you from drifting too far. They return you to yourself. When you could have gone numb, you chose sensitivity. When you could have become bitter, you remained tender. That is divine grace at work. There are countless stories, modern and ancient, of miraculous protection. A soldier who survives a war with a single psalm in his pocket. A child who falls from a great height and walks away unhurt. A person who changes routes at the last minute and avoids disaster. We hear these stories and call them miracles. For the chosen, they are messages. You are not forgotten. You are not forsaken. To embrace divine protection is not to live without caution, but to live with confidence. It means walking forward not in fear, but in faith, knowing that while life may be unpredictable, your destiny is not fragile. It is anchored in God's will. Protection doesn't mean a pain-free life. It means a preserved purpose. You may carry scars, but you're still here, still breathing, still rising. That means your mission continues. So look back at your life. Find those Ebenezers, those moments that shouldn't have gone the way they did. The accidents that didn't happen. The despair that didn't consume you. The people who came and left at just the right time. These are divine breadcrumbs. God's hand has been on your life since the beginning. And the same hand that shielded you then is guiding you now. You are protected not because you are lucky, but because you are loved. Because your purpose matters. Because your presence here is no accident. The invisible hand that guards the chosen never sleeps, never retreats, never fails. So walk boldly, beloved. You are not alone. You are covered. You are protected. Chapter 6. Connection. A child's intimate bond with the divine, before doctrine, before theology, before rituals and rules. There exists, in the heart of a chosen child, a simple but powerful knowing God is near. This awareness is not taught, it is felt. It is not the result of Sunday sermons or memorized verses. It is an instinctive connection, as natural as breathing. For many chosen ones, this connection begins before they can speak its name. It emerges as a quiet friendship, a sense that someone is always listening, always present, always caring. You may have felt it. The urge to talk to God, not in rehearsed prayers, but in your own words, whispered into the silence. Maybe you looked at the sky and felt watched over. Maybe you found comfort in nature, feeling as if the trees or the wind or the stars were somehow conduits of something greater. These were not childish fantasies. They were sacred dialogues. The intimacy between a chosen child and the divine often mirrors that of the prophets. In 1 Samuel 3:10, the young Samuel hears the voice of God calling him in the night. Confused at first, he learns to answer, "Speak, for your servant is listening." There is no temple, no congregation, no formal instruction, just a heart open enough to hear. This is the nature of divine connection. It bypasses structures and flows straight into the soul. Chosen children are spiritually attuned long before they are spiritually trained. Their prayers may be simple, but they are potent. Their conversations with God may lack eloquence, but they are honest. And honesty is the language of heaven. Perhaps you remember moments when you felt peace in places where there should have been fear, or joy in moments that made no earthly sense. These are the fruits of connection. They are signs that the divine was not just above you or around you, but within you. Psalm 145:18 assures us the Lord is near to all who call on Him, to all who call on Him in truth. This nearness is not based on performance. It is rooted in relationship. And the chosen, even as children, are drawn to that nearness like flowers to the sun. Connection expresses itself in many ways. For some, it is a deep sense of comfort when praying. For others, it is awe during moments of beauty, sunrises, oceans, music, or stillness. These encounters may feel personal, but they are also profoundly sacred. God speaks in beauty. He whispers in stillness. And the chosen child hears. You may have talked to God like a friend telling Him about your day, your fears, your questions. You may have looked for signs, cloud shapes, patterns in nature, a repeated number, a verse that found you instead of the other way around. All of these are forms of conversation. And if you were doing this as a child, it's because your spirit already remembered its source. Divine connection often comes with a desire to seek solitude, not to escape people, but to commune with the invisible. You may have found yourself sitting alone, not out of loneliness, but out of longing. There was a presence in your silence, a warmth in your solitude, a knowing that you were not alone. Many children describe imaginary friends or invisible companions. But for the chosen, those friends may have been angelic presences or spiritual guides. Scripture is clear: angels are assigned to us, Psalm 91:11, and many of them minister in unseen ways, especially to those marked by divine purpose. This connection does not make the chosen child perfect, but it does make them aware of right and wrong, aware of others' feelings, aware of deeper truths. While other children may laugh at faith, the chosen child often clings to it, not because they were told to, but because they've tasted it. Perhaps you felt this connection most during times of need, when no one else could comfort you. Prayer did, when others left you out. God felt close. When you were afraid, faith became your anchor. These are not psychological crutches. They are spiritual lifelines. You are not imagining God's presence. You are experiencing it. In mystic Christianity, this kind of intimacy with God is called unitive consciousness, a state where the soul recognizes its oneness with the Creator. Saints and mystics like Julian of Norwich, Brother Lawrence, and Teresa of Avila wrote extensively about this connection. But the seeds of it are often planted in childhood. Even Jesus, as a boy, exhibited this bond. In Luke 2:46-49, he is found in the temple, astonishing teachers with his wisdom. When asked why he stayed behind, he replies, "Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house?" This isn't rebellion, it's relationship. It's the same instinct that leads chosen children to seek spiritual truth, even when it sets them apart. This connection also gives rise to spiritual hunger. Chosen ones often want to know more about God, not just facts, but essence. They ask questions others ignore. They feel restless until they find a deeper understanding. And they often discover that no church, no doctrine, no book can fully contain the God they've already met in spirit. That's because connection is experiential. It transcends explanation. And once you've encountered the divine personally, no one can argue you out of it. They can doubt your theology, but they cannot erase your experience. And yet, this connection often leads to isolation. The chosen child may struggle to relate to others. They may feel too deep, too intense, or too sensitive. But that's because they're wired to listen to a voice the world has forgotten how to hear. To carry this connection into adulthood requires nurturing. The noise of life, the wounds of experience, the distractions of modernity, and these can dull your awareness. But the connection is never severed. It only needs to be remembered. Return to the place where you first felt Him. Revisit the silence. Rekindle the wonder. God has never left. The connection still pulses, waiting for your attention. You may notice that your best insights come when you're alone, that peace floods in when you release control, that love wells up when you pause to notice beauty. These are signs that the connection remains strong. In John 15:4, Jesus says, "Abide in me, and I will abide in you." That abiding began early for you. It was not dependent on age, knowledge, or religion. It was a matter of spirit. So if you remember feeling close to God as a child, if you prayed without prompting, if you trusted without proof, if you sought answers no one else was asking, it's because the divine had already claimed you. The connection was never your invention, it was your inheritance. You are not distant from God. You are His dwelling place. And the conversation that began in childhood, it is still ongoing. Listen, God is still speaking, and He never forgot the sound of your voice. Chapter 7. Challenges. The sacred trials that shape the chosen. One of the most overlooked signs of being chosen is not blessing, but struggle. Not applause, but adversity. Not ease, but resistance. From a spiritual perspective, challenges are not proof of abandonment, they are evidence of assignment. Chosen ones rarely have smooth beginnings. Their childhoods may be marked by pain, conflict, isolation, or loss. This does not mean they are cursed. It means they are being carved, refined, prepared, and strengthened for a life that will carry more spiritual weight than most. As a child, you may have often felt like you didn't belong. Maybe it wasn't just about being different in interests or temperament. Maybe there was a deeper sense of spiritual misplacement, as if your soul was out of step with the world around you. You may have struggled to connect with peers, to find joy in what others enjoyed, or to feel seen for who you really were. This internal dissonance is not a flaw. It is the tension that arises when a soul built for eternity is placed in a temporal world. Romans 5:3-4 teaches us we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. This passage reveals a divine formula. God uses pain not as punishment, but as preparation. And the earlier that preparation begins, the stronger the vessel becomes. Many chosen ones endure loneliness in childhood, not because they were unloved, but because they were misunderstood. Their thoughts were deeper, their emotions more intense, their sense of purpose more mature. Adults may have called them too sensitive, too serious, or too withdrawn. But inwardly, they were carrying the weight of destiny. Perhaps you lost someone close to you at a young age, or faced financial hardship, or lived in an environment filled with conflict. These experiences were never God's desire, but He wastes nothing. Every scar, every tear, every unanswered question was gathered by grace and woven into the fabric of your becoming. The biblical heroes were no strangers to early hardship. Moses, born under a death sentence, was hidden in a basket and raised in a foreign palace. Joseph was sold by his brothers and imprisoned before ascending to power. David was the forgotten son, left in the fields while others were considered for kingship. Even Jesus, the ultimate chosen one, was born in a stable and pursued by a murderous king. Their greatness did not come. Despite their suffering, it came through it. The challenges of a chosen child do more than toughen them. They soften them too. They create empathy, compassion, and perspective. When you've tasted rejection, you recognize it in others. When you've battled fear, you learn to walk with courage. When you've felt abandoned, you become an advocate for the forgotten. You may have found yourself taking on the role of caretaker, even as a child, looking out for siblings, mediating between parents, holding space for others while suppressing your own needs. This isn't just a personality trait, it's the beginning of a calling. God was cultivating in you a shepherd's heart. But challenges also provoke questions. Why me? Why this? Why so much so soon? These questions are not signs of weak faith. They are signs of an engaged spirit. Even the Psalms, written by a man after God's own heart, are filled with cries of anguish and confusion. How long? Lord, why have you forgotten me? Why do the wicked prosper? God welcomes these questions because they create conversation. And conversation creates intimacy. And intimacy reveals purpose. If your childhood was difficult, if you felt overlooked or overburdened, know this: your pain is not wasted. Every hardship has become holy ground. Every wound has become a window through which light now shines. In the spiritual path, suffering is often the womb of wisdom. The most powerful teachers are those who have first been students of sorrow. The most effective healers are those who have been wounded themselves. You are not weak because you struggled. You are strong because you survived. In many mystical traditions, trials are seen as sacred initiations. In the wilderness, you learn to listen. In the fire, you learn what can't be burned. In the silence, you learn what truly speaks. And in the breaking, you discover what cannot be broken. Even now, looking back, you may begin to see the pattern. The moments that nearly crushed you became the moments that most defined you. The betrayals that hurt the most birthed your deepest discernment. The abandonment that left you empty created space for God to fill. And sometimes, the challenge wasn't external, it was internal. The battle with self-doubt, the fear of being too much or not enough, the pressure to conform, the desire to please, the longing to disappear. These inner trials are just as sacred. They teach you self-compassion. They develop spiritual backbone. They teach you to root your identity, not in applause, but in alignment. In 2 Corinthians 12:9, Paul writes of his own challenge, his thorn in the flesh, saying that God responded, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Your weakness, beloved, is not a barrier. It is a conduit. What you thought disqualified you may be the very thing that qualifies you most. The rejection prepared you for divine acceptance. The silence made room for divine voice. The struggle strengthened the roots of divine purpose. You have been shaped by sacred hands, even when the shaping hurt. So, if you feel that your childhood was marked by trials, do not assume you were forgotten. Assume you were being formed. The furnace is hot, but it refines gold. The pressure is intense, but it creates diamonds. The struggle is real, but it births the strong. You are not here by accident. Your story is not random. Your suffering was never the end, it was the beginning. You were chosen, and chosen ones are never shaped in comfort. They are shaped in fire. But from that fire, they rise, wiser, stronger, brighter, marked not only by what they've endured, but by the purpose those trials have activated. You are that person, and your challenges, they were the sacred seeds of your greatness. Water them, bless them, and let them grow. Chapter 8. Fascination. Drawn to stories of faith, purpose, and destiny. Long before a chosen one fully understands their calling, they often find themselves mysteriously drawn to the stories of others who walked paths of faith, purpose, and sacrifice. These are not simply tales of adventure or moral lessons. They are spiritual echoes, soul memories reminding the listener of who they are and who they are becoming. As a child, perhaps you found yourself fascinated by stories that others overlooked. While your peers were captivated by cartoons, you were absorbed in tales of courageous saints, biblical heroes, spiritual warriors, or historical figures who defied the odds with divine help. You may not have known why these narratives stirred something deep within you, but they did. This early fascination is not accidental. It is a sign. Hebrews 12:1 says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and run with perseverance the race marked out for us." The chosen are drawn to these witnesses, these soul mentors, because their stories are mirrors. They do not entertain. They awaken. They resonate with the parts of you that have always known you were meant to do something greater. You may have been captivated by David facing Goliath, not for the drama of battle, but for the boldness of faith. Or by Esther, who risked her life for her people not for the suspense, but for the sacred duty. Or by Noah, who obeyed when everyone else mocked. These weren't just Sunday school stories to you. They were internal compasses. This fascination may have extended beyond Scripture. You may have felt a connection to martyrs, missionaries, reformers, mystics, those who gave their lives to a cause greater than themselves. Their sacrifices were not just admirable. They were familiar. You recognized in them a courage you were still learning to find in yourself, even outside of overtly spiritual figures. You may have admired those who stood alone for truth, civil rights leaders, visionaries, artists who defied the norms, voices who shook systems. What mattered most wasn't the fame or success. It was the fire within them. Why? Because you were born with the same fire. Stories are one of the oldest forms of spiritual transmission. In ancient times, they were passed orally, like sacred seeds carried on the wind. They weren't just to inform, they were meant to initiate. And the chosen, even as children, were often the first to recognize which stories held holy weight. You may have returned to certain tales over and over again. You reread that book, rewatched that scene, recited that line. Not because you forgot it, but because something in your soul kept saying, remember this. These moments of captivation were invitations to destiny. They were clues. And your fascination was a signal that your spirit was being tutored in the ways of calling. In mystical theology, the concept of anamnesis refers to a kind of sacred remembering where the soul recalls truths it once knew before birth. Fascination with certain stories can be a form of anamnesis. It's not about learning something new. It's about being reminded of something eternal. If you've ever cried during a story and didn't know why, it may be because your soul was saying, this is what you're made for. The stories that stick are often the ones that speak to our assignment. The chosen are drawn to tales of perseverance because they will need it, to stories of sacrifice because they will face it, to stories of divine purpose because they carry it. Even the structure of these stories matters. They often follow what scholars call the hero's journey, a calling, a resistance, a departure from the familiar, trials, allies, enemies, a dark night of the soul, and finally, transformation. This isn't just narrative structure. It's spiritual blueprint. You may have intuitively sensed this. When others rolled their eyes at yet another story of faith overcoming fear, you leaned in. When others saw cliché, you saw confirmation. This hunger for meaningful stories also often becomes a pathway to purpose. Many chosen ones become storytellers themselves. Writers, speakers, artists, ministers, teachers, those who pass the flame forward. They don't just consume truth. They carry it. Maybe you've always felt the urge to write, to speak, to create. Maybe you felt like there was a message inside you, even if you didn't yet know the words. That too is a sign. The fascination that once fed your spirit is now asking to be expressed. God uses stories to call us, to correct us, to comfort us. Jesus himself taught in parables not to entertain, but to awaken. He knew that stories bypassed defenses. They reach the heart. If you, as a child, found yourself staying up late to read, or felt goosebumps during a certain film, or paused in reverence after hearing someone's testimony, it was not coincidence. It was alignment. The enemy of your soul has always known this. That's why one of his tactics is to dull your wonder, to fill your time with distractions, to make stories feel trivial. But for the chosen, stories are sacred. They are encounters. Return to them. Revisit the ones that stirred you. Read that chapter again. Listen to that testimony again. Watch that scene again. Let the words reawaken what routine has buried, and then write your own, because the next generation of chosen ones needs new stories. And yours might be one of them. Don't underestimate the pull you feel towards certain narratives. Don't dismiss it as nostalgia or sentimentality. It is spiritual hunger. And spiritual hunger always leads to spiritual fulfillment. Fascination is not a passing phase. It is a form of prophecy. It shows you who you are and who you are becoming. The stories that move you most are often the ones you were born to live. So listen to them, honor them, let them become you. Because you, too, are a story in the making. And one day, someone will hear your story and recognize their own calling. That is the power of fascination. It's not about entertainment. It's about awakening. And you, beloved, are already awake. Chapter 9. Curiosity. The sacred questions that point to calling. There are questions that are born from boredom, and there are questions born from the soul. For the chosen ones, especially in childhood, curiosity is not a passing phase. It is a sacred compass. It is the soul's way of remembering, of searching, of knocking on the door of destiny. From an early age, you may have found yourself asking things that others never considered. Not just, what do I want to be when I grow up, but why are we here? Who is God? Really, what happens after we die? Why do people suffer? These questions did not come from textbooks or television. They came from somewhere deeper, from the core of who you are. And while adults may have answered you with a laugh, a shrug, or a quote from a book, your soul remained unsatisfied. Because your questions weren't about information. They were about truth. In Proverbs 2:3-5 we read, "Indeed, if you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God." Your curiosity is not childish, it is holy. Curiosity has always been the spark of divine discovery. Moses turned aside to see the burning bush because he was curious. Samuel listened in the night because he was curious about the voice that kept calling. Jesus, at 12 years old, stayed behind in the temple to ask questions and discuss spiritual matters with scholars. His parents were confused, but he was compelled. That same compulsion lives in you. Many chosen children are natural seekers. They are not content with surface-level answers. They dig deeper. They observe more. They connect dots that others don't even see. This hunger to know, to understand, to uncover, this is not random. It's the unfolding of divine curiosity, your desire to learn about spiritual mysteries, to explore the meaning behind suffering, to question the structure of life itself. These aren't distractions from your purpose. They are part of it. In many spiritual traditions, questioning is the first stage of awakening. The Buddha began his journey not with enlightenment, but with questions. So did Abraham. So did nearly every prophet and mystic throughout history. If you ever felt too curious as a child, know this: your curiosity was, and still is, a sacred gift. It means your spirit has not gone numb. It means your heart is still listening. The questions you asked as a child may have made others uncomfortable, but they made heaven rejoice, because God is not threatened by your questions. He is honored by them. They mean you are seeking Him not as an idea, but as a reality. Curiosity often shows up in unusual ways. Perhaps you are drawn to books far beyond your age level, or fascinated by the stars, by ancient civilizations, by the origins of life. Maybe you felt a pull toward different cultures, spiritual paths, or mysteries of the universe. All of this is part of your design. For the chosen, curiosity is not a detour. It's a guidepost. You may have felt like you didn't belong in traditional spaces, school, church, social settings, because your questions didn't fit the mold. But that's because you weren't made to fit molds. You were made to expand them. There is a holy restlessness in every chosen one. A whisper that says, there's more. More to know. More to see. More to become. That whisper is sacred. And the questions it leads you to are invitations, not tests. Questions like, why was I born into this family? Why do I feel different? What is my role in this life? What does God want from me? These are not questions of insecurity. They are signs of awakening. In John 1:38, Jesus turns to two disciples following him and asks, what do you seek? He doesn't tell them who he is. He begins with a question. Because questions open the door for revelation. The enemy would love to silence your curiosity, to distract you with comfort, with conformity, with surface answers. But your spirit knows better. You are not satisfied with the shallow. You were created for the depths. Even your doubt is sacred when it is rooted in desire for truth. Thomas, known as Doubting Thomas, wanted to see for himself. And Jesus did not rebuke him. He invited him to touch, to feel, to experience. Your search is not rebellion. It is relationship in motion. Curiosity also gives birth to creativity. Chosen ones often feel a deep urge to write, draw, build, sing, or speak. They don't just want to consume knowledge, they want to give it form. They want to translate spirit into substance. If you felt this as a child, the desire to express your inner world, it's because your questions were overflowing into creation. And this creation is worship. It's not about art for art's sake. It's about making the invisible visible. Many chosen children grow up to become spiritual teachers, healers, counselors, or innovators. Not because they have all the answers, but because they never stopped asking the right questions. So don't let go of your wonder. Don't apologize for your searching. The kingdom of God belongs to those who ask, seek, and knock. Your questions are proof that your spirit is alive, that your soul is attentive, that your destiny is unfolding. You were not created to memorize answers. You were created to explore mysteries, to sit in silence and hear the unspoken, to dig into Scripture and find yourself, to gaze at the stars and remember you are made of both dust and divinity. Curiosity is not confusion. It is clarity in motion. It is faith stretching its legs. So keep asking, keep wondering, keep seeking, because the one who placed the questions inside you will also meet you in the answers. And when you find them, you will realize they were never outside of you. They were waiting to be remembered. And now, you are remembering. Chapter 10. Resilience. The spiritual strength that sustains the chosen. If there is one trait that defines the journey of a chosen one from childhood to maturity, it is not perfection, not popularity, not even clarity. It is resilience. Resilience is the quiet, powerful ability to keep going when others quit. It is the inner fire that refuses to die, even when drenched in storms. It is the spiritual elasticity of a soul that bends, but does not break. For those who are chosen, resilience is not an option, it is a divine necessity. From an early age, you may have noticed that life didn't go easy on you. Maybe you faced loss, betrayal, hardship, or isolation. Maybe you fell down hard, but something inside you always got back up. Even when you didn't know how, or why, or what for you rose. Again and again. The rising wasn't accidental, it was spiritual training. In Isaiah 40:31, we are promised, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." This renewal is not physical, it is spiritual. And it belongs to those who have been chosen to endure much because they are called to carry much. Resilience is forged in trial. You don't gain it by reading or praying it into being. You gain it through the long nights of not knowing, through the silent seasons where God seems distant, through the disappointments that cut deep, and through the moments where quitting felt easier, but purpose whispered louder. You may have asked, why do I have to go through so much? The answer isn't cruelty, it's calling. The chosen are refined. Not because they're better, but because their purpose demands it. They must be able to stand when others fall, to speak when others are silent, to lead when others retreat. This requires a strength that is not rooted in willpower, but in God's power. And so, from a young age, you may have felt like you were always being prepared. Every setback was a setup for resilience. Every fall, a lesson in rising. Every failure, a chance to discover grace. Resilience also shows up in how you carry your empathy. While others are crushed by the weight of feeling, the chosen learn to transform pain into purpose. They don't just survive emotions, they channel them. You may have been the one who stayed strong for others, the one who people turned to, even when you had no one to turn to. You may have been the peacemaker, the protector, the one who saw the cracks and quietly held things together. That was not weakness. That was an anointing of resilience. The world often praises the loud, the aggressive, the domineering. But spiritual resilience is quieter. It's found in the mother who keeps loving despite heartbreak, in the artist who keeps creating in obscurity, in the prophet who keeps speaking when no one listens. It's found in you. You may not have felt strong, but your survival is proof of your strength. In 2 Corinthians 4:8-9, Paul writes, "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed." This is the anthem of the resilient. The chosen often carry generational burdens. You may be the one in your family who broke patterns, who chose healing over hiding, who pursued truth instead of tradition. That choice, however difficult, took strength. And that strength is resilience. Even your faith is resilient. It may not have been pristine or uninterrupted, but it endured. Through doubts, wounds, wanderings, it endured. The fact that you are still here, still seeking, still open to God, is testimony enough. Resilience also manifests as spiritual memory. You've been through dark seasons, yet you remember the light. You've seen loss, yet you believe in restoration. You've faced disappointment, yet you expect redemption. This hope is not delusion, it's prophecy. It's the Spirit within you declaring, "This is not the end." And that declaration becomes your strength. In the mystical traditions, resilience is often tied to the soul's eternal nature. The idea is simple but profound: that which is divine cannot be destroyed. Your essence, your calling, your light has been through fire, but it has not been extinguished. It has been refined, and now it glows. Resilience is also what allows you to rise with compassion, not bitterness. Many people suffer, but not all become healers. The chosen ones do, because they have learned that wounds are not walls. They are windows. You may have been through things you never talk about, but those very things have made you a safe place for others. You carry in your soul the medicine of survival, and you are proof that beauty can rise from ashes. If you've ever felt like giving up, but something stopped you, honor that moment. That was divine resilience. If you've ever wept and still worshiped, honor that strength. That was sacred endurance. If you've ever failed but kept believing, honor that faith. That was resurrection power. Your life is a living testimony that resilience is not about never falling. It's about rising differently each time. Rising wiser, rising deeper, rising more aligned with your purpose. You are not who you were at the beginning of this journey. You are stronger now. Softer, too. More discerning, more surrendered, more radiant with the light that comes only through the breaking and the building. So bless the wounds. Bless the setbacks. Bless the seasons that nearly undid you. They didn't, and because they didn't, you now carry a strength that is unshakable. This is the resilience of the chosen. It's quiet, it's steady, it's holy, and it is yours. Now walk in it, not as someone barely surviving, but as someone fully alive. Your strength is not just for you, it is for everyone watching. And when they ask how you made it, tell them this: I was chosen, I was broken, I was carried, I was called, and by the grace of God I rose. Amen.